"Do you know anyone who wants a little girl?" Zara Voss asked that question on a Tuesday. She was 6 years old, standing in the middle of the Harlow Grand Hotel lobby, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear, wearing a dress 2 sizes too big. She had dirt under her fingernails and bare feet on cold marble, and she was talking to Damien Rourke. The man half of Chicago was afraid to look in the eye. Damien had walked into that lobby to close a deal. He was supposed to be upstairs in 20 minutes with his lawyer and a pen. He was not supposed to be crouching down in front of a child who smelled like she hadn't eaten in 2 days, asking him if he knew anyone who wanted her. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "What's your name?" "Zara. Where's your mom, Zara?" She pointed at the ceiling. "She went up with Derek a long time ago." She said to wait. Damien looked at the front desk. He looked at the concierge. Nobody was paying attention. A child had been standing alone in this lobby long enough to approach a stranger. A very specific kind of stranger, one with a scar along his jaw and a reputation that preceded him into every room, and not one employee had said a word. He pulled out his phone. He called his lawyer and told him to push the meeting an hour. Then he sat down right there on a lobby bench and said, "Okay, Zara, tell me about your rabbit." She looked at him like she was deciding something. Then she sat down next to him, leaving 6 careful inches of space between them, and said, "His name is Button. He has a missing eye, but I don't mind." "I don't mind either," Damien said. That was how it started. Damien Rourke was 41 years old, and he had not become the kind of man people whispered about by being soft. He had built his name in the years when Chicago's real estate market was something closer to a war zone, when acquiring the right block in the right neighborhood meant knowing who to pay and who to threaten and occasionally who to make disappear. He had never gone to prison. He had never needed to. He was the kind of man who didn't leave traces, and the people who worked for him understood that. He had a penthouse apartment on the 47th floor, and a house in Lake Forest he never slept in, and 3 cars he barely drove. He had a personal assistant named Todd who anticipated his needs before he had them, and a chef who came in 3 mornings a week, and a housekeeper named Rosa who had been with him for 9 years, and was the only person on earth who talked to him like a human being. He did not have children. He had not particularly wanted them. His assistant called him twice while he was sitting in that lobby. He ignored both calls. He watched Zara eat a sandwich he'd had the concierge bring from the restaurant, watched her eat it quickly and carefully, the way children eat when they're not sure if someone's going to take it away. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. Her mother did not come down. He had his head of security, a man named Carver, do a quiet check on the room. Room 412. Registered to a Derek Holst, a name Damien recognized. Mid-level dealer, recently moved operations into the hospitality sector, which was a polite way of saying he ran girls out of a handful of hotels on the north side. Carver reported that there were currently 2 people in the room, and they were not coming out anytime soon, and the child's mother appeared to be in no condition to be anyone's mother. Damien looked at Zara, who had finished the sandwich and was now showing Button the fountain in the center of the lobby. He called his lawyer back. He told him to cancel the meeting entirely. Then he said to Zara, "Is there someone else? A grandparent, an aunt, someone your mom usually leaves you with?" Zara thought about it. "Aunt Nadine," but she moved. "Do you know where?" Mom said somewhere far. "Anyone else?" Zara looked down at Button. She touched his missing eye side gently. "No," she said. "It's usually just me and Mom, and Derek." She said Derek's name the way you say the name of a storm, like a weather event, something that happens to you, something you've learned to track from a distance. Damien said, "Does Derek ever hurt you?" She didn't answer right away. She adjusted Button's ear. Then she said very quietly, "He says I'm too loud even when I'm not making any sound." He felt something shift in his chest. He hadn't felt that in a long time. He wasn't sure he'd felt it ever. He called Rosa. Rosa Medina had worked for Damien Rourke long enough to know that when he called her at 3 in the afternoon on a deal day, something had gone sideways. She had not expected him to say, "I need the guest room made up, and I need you to find out if there's a children's store near the hotel because I have a child here and she's wearing the wrong size everything." There was a pause. "A child," Rosa said, 6 years old. "Her name is Zara. Her mother is currently unavailable." Another pause. "And you are bringing her home, temporarily?" "Of course," Rosa said, "temporarily." She paused again. "What does she like to eat?" He looked at Zara. "What do you like to eat?" Zara considered this with great seriousness. "Macaroni," she said, "and apples, but not together." He relayed this information. Rosa said she'd have both ready and hung up before he could say anything else. He did not bring Zara upstairs. He took her to the hotel restaurant instead, bought her hot chocolate, and called Carver back. He told Carver to go up to 412 and have a conversation with Derek Holst. Not the kind of conversation that left marks, just the kind that made expectations clear. He also told Carver to find out the mother's name, her last known address, and whether there was any paperwork, any custody arrangement, any family services involvement, anything on record. Zara drank her hot chocolate with both hands wrapped around the mug. She left a faint chocolate mustache and didn't notice. "Do you go to school?" Damien asked. "Do you like it?" "I like the books," she said. "The teacher has a cart. She lets you pick one. One what? One book, to hold during quiet time." She glanced up at him. "I always pick the same one. It has a dog on the cover. The dog's name is Biscuit. Is it a good book?" "It's the same one every time," she said, like that answered the question. Maybe it did. Carver came back 40 minutes later. He handed Damien a folded piece of paper and gave him a look that communicated several things without saying any of them. Damien read the paper. He kept his face very still. The mother's name was Jolene Voss. She had 2 prior child services investigations, both closed for lack of follow-up. She had no permanent address. She had been in 3 different cities in the past 14 months. She had a record, possession, 1 count of fraud, a protective order from 3 years ago involving a man who was not Derek Holst. Damien folded the paper. He looked at Zara, who was trying to balance a sugar packet on the back of Button's head. He thought about the way she'd said he says I'm too loud even when I'm not making any sound. He thought about the way she'd eaten that sandwich. He thought about the question she'd asked him, standing in the middle of that marble floor, bare feet, wrong size dress, 1 stuffed rabbit. "Do you know anyone who wants a little girl?" he said. "Zara, you're going to come stay with me for a little while, okay? While we figure some things out." She looked at him carefully. She had gray eyes, very steady for a 6-year-old. She said, "Does your house have a window?" "Many windows." "A real bed? Not a cot?" "A real bed." She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "But Button comes." "Button absolutely comes," Damien said. Rosa was waiting for them in the lobby of his building. She was a small woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that had seen enough to be unshockable but chose kindness anyway. She looked at Zara, and Zara looked back at her. Rosa crouched down to eye level. She didn't reach out to touch her. She just said, "You must be Zara. I'm Rosa. I made macaroni." Zara said, "Is it the kind with the orange powder?" "Is there another kind?" Rosa asked. Zara almost smiled. It was small, barely there, a ghost of something. But Damien saw it and didn't say anything, because he understood instinctively that if you pointed at it, it would disappear. Rosa led her to the kitchen. Damien stood in his own entryway for a moment, looking at the apartment. The clean lines, the expensive quiet, the complete and total absence of anything soft. And for the first time in years, it looked like what it was. A place no one actually lived. She didn't sleep the first night. He knew because he didn't sleep either, and at 2 in the morning he heard her in the hallway, not walking, just standing outside her door in the dark. He got up. He didn't turn on the light. He sat down on the floor in the hall and said, "Can't sleep?" A pause. Then she sat down too, a few feet away, Button in her lap. "I'm not used to quiet," she said. "What are you used to?" She thought about it. "Noise," she said. "Loud voices. Sometimes doors." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. They sat in the dark hall for a while, not talking. After maybe 20 minutes, she said, "I'm going to try again," and went back to her room. He heard the door click shut. He sat there another few minutes, then went back to bed. In the morning, Rosa made eggs. Zara ate them sitting on her knees on the kitchen chair, watching the city out the window like she was seeing it for the first time. "It's so high up," she said. 47 floors, Damien said. "Do you ever fall out?" "The windows don't open." She seemed to find this reassuring. She went back to her eggs. 3 days later, his lawyer told him that Jolene Voss had been admitted to a hospital. Not the kind with doctors making rounds. The kind with a different protocol and a stay of at least 30 days. Derek Holst had left the hotel. There was a warrant out for him on something unrelated, which Damien had not arranged but did not feel bad about. Family Services was involved. There would be a caseworker. There would be paperwork. There would be a process. His lawyer, a measured man named Price who had known Damien for 15 years and had learned not to ask certain questions, said, "What do you want to do?" Damien was quiet for a moment. He thought about a 6-year-old in a too big dress asking a stranger if he knew anyone who wanted her. He said, "What do I need to file?" Price paused. Then he said, "Emergency foster, temporary guardian. We'd need a home assessment, background check, financial disclosure." "Start the paperwork," Damien said. Another pause. "Damien, you understand this is not a small thing." I know, this isn't like acquiring a property. I know what it isn't. Price was quiet. Then he said, I'll start the paperwork. The caseworker's name was Annalise Dunn. She was in her mid-30s, sharp, and she looked at Damien Rourke's apartment, and then at Damien Rourke with the same expression. Careful, measuring, withholding judgment for now, but not forever. She asked him standard questions. How long had he known the child? Under what circumstances had he encountered her? What was his current household setup, his work schedule, his support system? He answered everything straight. He had decided the night before she came that he was going to be honest about everything she asked, not because he had to be, but because Zara deserved someone who was going to be honest on her behalf. Annalise wrote things down. Then she asked if she could speak to Zara alone. Of course, he said. He went to his office and closed the door and did not listen. 20 minutes later, Annalise knocked. She came in and sat down across from him. She's very guarded, Annalise said. That's expected. But she's not. She doesn't seem frightened here. That matters. It matters a lot, he said. Annalise looked at him for a moment. Mr. Rourke, your background is complex, yes. There are things in your file that would normally disqualify a placement. I know. Why should I recommend this one? He didn't answer immediately. He thought about what he could say, the resources he had, the stability, the fact that he could give her things most people couldn't. He thought about all the practical answers. Then he said, because she asked me, and I said yes. And I think she needs someone to mean it. Annalise looked at him for a long time. She wrote something down. She closed her notebook. I'll file my recommendation this week, she said. He was not a natural at it. He knew that. He was a man who had optimized everything, his schedule, his environment, his relationships, for the absence of complications, and a 6-year-old was a complication in every possible direction. She had nightmares. She sometimes refused to eat and he couldn't figure out why, and Rosa eventually told him not to push, that pushing made it worse, that you just left the plate and walked away and let her come to it herself. He learned that. She had a thing about doors. She didn't like them closed all the way, not at night. He started leaving his office door cracked, and her bedroom door, and the bathroom door when it wasn't in use, so the whole apartment breathed a little, so there were no hard seams of shut-out dark. She didn't like loud voices. He had always been a quiet man, which helped. He had Todd take all calls with voices raised to a separate room. She loved windows. She spent a lot of time at the floor-to-ceiling glass in the living room, looking at the city below, watching clouds move. He had Rosa put a small cushioned bench under the biggest window, just the right height for a 6-year-old to sit on with her knees up and button in her lap. The first time she laughed, really laughed, not the careful, almost smile, was when Rosa accidentally dropped an entire bowl of flour and it went everywhere, dusting them both white. Zara watched from the doorway so hard she had to hold onto the doorframe, and Rosa looked at Damien over the child's head with an expression he couldn't quite name, something between relief and something much older and heavier than that. He laughed too. He hadn't meant to, it just came out. 7 weeks in, a man showed up at his building. Not Derek Holst, someone else. A man named Gary Voss. Jolene's brother, Zara's uncle, who had heard about the placement through family services and wanted to stake a claim. He was loud about it in the lobby downstairs, loud enough that security called Damien, and Damien came down himself. Gary Voss was 40-something, red-faced, the kind of man whose loudness was a substitute for everything he didn't have. He told Damien he had rights. He told him family was family. He told him a man like Damien had no business raising someone else's kid. Damien stood very still. He was good at standing still. He had learned, in the years when stillness was survival, that the quieter you were, the louder everything else became. He'd said, Zara, do you know where she's been living for the past 7 weeks? Gary blustered. He didn't know. He admitted he hadn't seen Zara in almost 2 years. Damien said, she has her own room, her own window. She's starting to sleep through the night. She has a doctor, a good one, a pediatrician who asked her permission before doing her checkup, and she's enrolled in a school 4 blocks from here starting next month. He paused. Where would she go with you? Gary said something about rights again, about blood. Damien looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, you can pursue this through legal channels. My lawyer's name is Price. Here's his card. He handed it over. But I would encourage you to think carefully about what that process will require you to demonstrate, versus what I have already demonstrated. Gary looked at the card. He didn't come back. Damien went upstairs. Zara was at her window bench, button in her lap, watching clouds. She looked at him when he came in. Was that loud man here about me? She had ears like a satellite dish. He should have known. Yes, he said. He sat down in the chair near her. He's gone now. Is he going to make me leave? No. She looked at him, those steady gray eyes. How do you know? Because I won't let that happen, he said. And then, because he had decided to be honest, I would really like it if you stayed, Zara, if that's what you want. She turned this over. She looked out the window. She looked back at him. Can I bring Button? She said. Button lives here, he said. This is Button's home. She thought about this for a very long time. Then she climbed off the bench, crossed the room, and sat down on the arm of his chair, not touching him, just close. The closest she had been. She said, okay, that was all. Just, okay. He didn't say anything either. He looked out the window at the city with her, the two of them side by side in the afternoon light, and something settled in him that had not been still in a very long time. The formal guardianship was approved 4 months later. Price called him with the news on a Wednesday morning. Damien was in the kitchen eating toast while Zara informed Rosa at considerable volume that Button needed his own plate because he was a guest. He set the phone down on the counter. Rosa looked at him. He gave her a small nod. She put her hand over her mouth for a moment, then turned back to getting Button a plate. Zara had by this point been at his building long enough to know where the plates were kept. She got Button a small one herself, the blue one, and set it on the table with great ceremony. Damien sat down across from her. She looked up. What? Nothing, he said. Just good morning. She considered this. Good morning, she said. Then, can Button have toast? Button can have toast. She tore a piece into rabbit-sized bites and arranged them on the blue plate with the seriousness of someone laying a place at a formal dinner. Then she looked up again, something in her face different, not quite a question, more like the moment before a question. She said, What do I call you? He was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the things he could say, all the careful, honest, appropriate things. He thought about the word guardian and the word Damien and the word that was sitting underneath both of them, the word neither of them had said yet. She was watching him with those gray eyes. Patient, steady, waiting, he said, whatever feels right to you. She looked at Button, she looked at her plate. She picked up her fork. Then, very quietly, not looking at him, she said, Okay, Dad. He didn't respond immediately, he couldn't. He looked at the table for a moment, jaw tight, and when he looked up she was eating her eggs, like she hadn't said anything remarkable at all, like it was the most ordinary word in the world, like she'd been saying it her whole life, and had just finally found the right place to put it. Rosa was at the counter with her back to them both and her shoulders were shaking, and she was very loudly doing nothing with the dishes. Zara glanced at her. Is Rosa crying? Yes, Damien said. His voice came out even. He was proud of that. Why? Because she's happy. Zara considered this with the particular gravity of a child who has learned that the world is more complicated than it first appears. Then she said, Oh, and went back to her eggs. He picked up his toast. His hands were completely steady. Outside the 47th floor windows, the city was loud and enormous and entirely ordinary, going about its business the way it always did, indifferent to the small quiet thing that had just happened at a kitchen table. The thing that couldn't be undone and wouldn't be. The thing that had begun on a Tuesday with a little girl in a too big dress asking a stranger a question he hadn't known he'd been waiting his whole life to answer.